For more than a century, millions of people have looked at these haunting white figures and believed they were seeing human bodies preserved by one of history's deadliest volcanic eruptions. History books say they are the victims of Pompeii. Museums display them as the city's final witnesses. And almost everyone walks away believing they are looking at real bodies, frozen in time. But they aren't. Not one of them. The famous victims of Pompeii are not preserved corpses. They never turned to stone. In fact, the people you're looking at disappeared nearly 2,000 years ago. What survived was something far more haunting. Look closely. The fingers, the faces, the way one person appears to shield themselves. Another reaches toward someone beside them. Some even seem peaceful. Others look terrified. Every wrinkle, every fold of clothing, every expression feels impossibly lifelike. Yet none of those details belong to a preserved human body. So where did they come from? How can something that no longer exists still leave behind a perfect human form? To answer that question, we first need to understand what happened beneath the ash of Pompeii. Because the greatest illusion wasn't created by archaeologists. It began the moment the volcano fell silent. In the summer of AD 79, life in Pompeii came to an abrupt end. Mount Vesuvius erupted with unimaginable force, sending towering columns of ash, volcanic rock, and scorching gases high into the sky. Within hours, the thriving Roman city disappeared beneath layer after layer of volcanic debris. Homes, markets, temples, entire streets vanished from the world above. For centuries, Pompeii remained hidden beneath the hardened remains of the eruption. When archaeologists finally uncovered the city, they expected to find ruins, broken walls, collapsed roofs, perhaps even scattered human bones. Instead, they discovered something no one could explain. Human figures, still trapped in their final moments.
The first assumption most people make is also the biggest misconception. The victims did not turn into stone. They did not become statues, and they were never perfectly preserved by the volcanic ash. What happened was both quieter and far more extraordinary. After the eruption, the victims lay completely buried beneath layers of ash and volcanic debris. Over time, the intense heat faded. The city grew silent. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Like every human body, soft tissue slowly broke down through natural decomposition. Muscles disappeared. Skin vanished. Organs returned to the earth. Eventually, almost nothing remained except bones and something no one could see. Because while the bodies were disappearing, the volcanic ash surrounding them was changing too. The loose ash gradually hardened into a dense shell, almost like concrete. It had wrapped itself around every surface of the victims before their bodies vanished. So when the soft tissue finally disappeared, it didn't leave behind empty ground. It left behind a hollow space, a perfect human-shaped cavity hidden inside solid volcanic rock. For nearly 18 centuries, those invisible spaces waited in complete darkness, waiting for someone to discover they were there. In 1863, Italian archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed something unusual beneath Pompeii. Hidden inside the hardened volcanic deposits were hollow spaces shaped like human bodies. He believed they had been left behind after the victims slowly decomposed. To test his theory, he poured liquid plaster into one of the cavities. Days later, after the plaster had hardened, workers carefully removed the surrounding volcanic deposits. The result was unlike anything archaeology had ever seen. A human figure emerged, exactly as it had fallen nearly 18 centuries earlier. Not because the body had survived, but because the empty space around it had. For the first time, archaeologists could see the victims' final positions with remarkable accuracy. Each new cavity revealed another story. A parent shielding a child. Friends lying side by side. People still clutching the belongings they carried on the day the city disappeared. Fiorelli's method transformed invisible voids into one of archaeology's greatest discoveries. But it also created a misconception that still survives today. Millions of people came to believe they were looking at preserved bodies. They weren't.
The secret was never the plaster. It was the cavity. When Fiorelli poured plaster into the empty space, he wasn't preserving a body. He was preserving its absence. Every surface inside the cavity had been shaped by the victim before the body disappeared. The curve of a face, the bend of a knee, the position of a hand, even the folds of clothing pressed into the surrounding ash. The body was gone, but its final imprint remained. The plaster simply filled that imprint. That's why the casts appear so astonishingly lifelike. They are not copies of people. They are copies of the spaces people once occupied. It is a small distinction, but it changes everything. And yet, the story wasn't over. Modern technology would reveal that many of these casts still held secrets hidden beneath the plaster itself.
For more than a century, the plaster casts were studied from the outside, but no one knew exactly what remained within them. Then, modern CT scanning changed everything. Without damaging the casts, archaeologists could finally look inside. What they found surprised even experts. Many casts still contained human bones. Some revealed nearly complete skeletons. Others preserved only fragments. But together, they offered something the plaster alone never could. Researchers could estimate age, identify signs of disease, study old injuries, and even understand how some victims had lived long before the eruption. Personal belongings also emerged from the scans. Rings, sandals, small objects that had remained untouched since AD 79. Nearly 2,000 years later, the victims were still telling archaeologists a new story.
Perhaps the greatest irony of Pompeii is that one of archaeology's greatest discoveries also became one of its greatest misunderstandings. The plaster casts were never meant to replace the victims. They were created to preserve the evidence they left behind. Yet over time, the casts became so familiar that millions of people stopped seeing them for what they truly are. They are not preserved bodies. They are not people turned to stone. They are the final spaces once occupied by human lives. That single misunderstanding has survived for generations. But once you know the truth, you'll never look at Pompeii the same way again.
The victims of Pompeii never became statues. They never turned to stone. Their bodies disappeared centuries ago. But their stories did not. What survived was not flesh, but a final impression. A silent space where a human life once existed. Perhaps that is why these figures continue to move us today. Because they remind us that history is not always preserved by what remains. Sometimes it is preserved by what is lost.